which are by no means extremist. If that's blocked, people will turn to in other directions, and other forces will become powerful.
The turmoil in Egypt is important, as you said, because Egypt is somewhat of a strong ally of the United States and has, in part, worked with Israel. So I wonder, how does this affect progress, so to speak, in terms of a two-state solution with Israel and Gaza?
See, you have to decode a number of common illusions in the United States. There are a lot of complicated problems in the world for which it's very hard even to imagine a sensible solution. But the Israel-Palestine conflict is not one of those. There's a very straightforward diplomatic solution. I mean, there are details that have to be resolved, but the major structure of it is not only straightforward and simple and well-known, but supported by virtually the entire world. For 35 years, the United States has been blocking it unilaterally with Israel. They take a look at the votes in the UN General Assembly. You know, they run 150 to 2 and things like that. Sometimes even higher, like last year. In fact, right at this moment, there's a resolution at the Security Council brought by Lebanon, which is one of the what's called moderate Arab states, supported by, I think, last time I looked, 120 countries, calling for the Security Council to demand an end to settlement expansion in the occupied territories. Theoretically, that's the U.S. position, and declaring the settlements illegal, which uncontroversially they are. Even Israel accepted that years ago. Well, the U.S. has indicated that if it comes to a vote, it'll veto it. I mean, that's the pattern for literally 35 years. So it's, we can't really ask the question, what will help the U.S. in its effort to bring a two-state settlement? That's not what the U.S. has been doing.
Right, but many people cite President Obama's June Cairo speech of 2009 as a major step forward, but you believe the Obama administration is taking kind of a typical U.S. stance in Palestine. Why is that?
Well, it's true that many people look at the speech that way, and that's the way it was presented. And in fact, it even did have that impact briefly in the Arab world. But take a closer look. On his way to Cairo, Obama had a press conference, of course. And in the press conference, he was asked, are you going to say anything about President Mubarak's authoritarian regime? I mean, authoritarian is something of an understatement. And his answer was significant. He said, I don't like to use labels for folks. President Mubarak is a good man. He's doing good things. He's keeping stability. He's a close ally. So, period. I'm not going to say anything about the atrocious human rights situation inside Egypt. The repression and the corruption, which finally led to the eruption of very dramatic popular protest. That's the other side of the Cairo speech. And if you look at the Cairo speech closely, it's mostly soothing rhetoric, but nothing of much substance. Actually, that's rather typical of Obama's public presentations. Look back at the 2008 campaign. There wasn't a lot of pleasant rhetoric and not too much in the way of substance. And what there was in the way of substance to appeal to his popular base was very quickly dropped as soon as he took office. That's not unusual, incidentally, but we shouldn't be deluded by it.
Is it harder for the U.S., though, to negotiate with Israel, with the Middle East, with Egypt, and with Palestine when you have Benjamin Netanyahu, who's further to the right, arguably, than Obama on a two-state solution, and you have what you call the wrong decision of the Palestinian people to put Hamas in, which many argue is in itself somewhat of a right-wing extremist group. Is it harder to progress when we have people whose views on the situation are so far different from each other that no common ground can be reached?
Common ground will not be it's whatever you may think about Hamas. I don't like them either, but fact is they were elected in the only free election in the Arab world, January 2006. The U.S. responded to that election instantly, as did Israel, by punishing the Palestinians, imposing siege, various restrictions, military attacks, not too long after an effort to overthrow the government by a military coup. Well, if that's the way you react to a free election, sensible people will draw their own conclusions about what you mean by democracy and freedom. It's true that Hamas, incidentally, whatever you think about it, has indicated its willingness repeatedly to accept a two-state arrangement. They don't call it a peace. They don't want to call it a peace treaty, and they say they won't recognize Israel, but they will accept a long-term, sometimes they say 50-year truce with two states. Well, not perfect, but it's a lot closer to the international consensus than either Israel or the U.S. have come. Netanyahu, of course, he rode to power on a right-wing extremist position. In fact, if you look back at his the electoral platform of the party, his own party, the Likud party, their electoral platform stated that there can never be any Palestinian self-determination in what they call the land of Israel. That means everything from Jordan to the sea and even parts of Jordan. I mean, that happens to be far more extremist than Hamas's position. But nobody takes it very seriously. If circumstances change, they'll accept a political settlement. They'll have to. The main question is, will the U.S. insist on it? Or will the U.S. continue to participate in undermining it? Notice that we're not a neutral bystander. The U.S. government, you and I, if we're taxpayers, actually participate regularly in the illegal activities that Israel's carrying out in the occupied territories, expansion of settlements and so on, which Washington claims to oppose. But they're continuing to help fund them, provide the diplomatic support, the military support, and so on. The same with the attack on Gaza. I mean, that was a U.S.-Israeli invasion. Israel used U.S. arms, U.S. helicopters, bombs, and so on, provided Israel, even in violation of U.S. law, which requires that military equipment be limited to self-defense or internal security, and it's clearly neither of those. In fact, that's why Amnesty International called for an arms boycott against Israel, because they didn't refer to American law, but they said the arms are being used in violation of international law, which is true as well. But we're participants. We're not standing on the outside.
We're speaking with Noam Chomsky, MIT professor. His latest book is Gaza in Crisis. The subtitle is Reflections on Israel's War Against the Palestinians. I wonder if you can paint us a picture of Israel's war against the Palestinians.
Well, the war goes way back. Remember that Israel's a settler colonial society, just like the United States was. This is incidentally the most extreme form of imperialism. You just take a look back at our own history. It's European immigrants, England, who came over and displaced the indigenous population, ended up exterminating most of them. And that was recognized. probably maybe 10 million or so in what's now the territorial United States. By the year 2000, when the census was taken, there were a couple 100,000. And it was understood by the famous founding fathers that they were simply being exterminated. Well, that's what settler colonialism is. Israel didn't go that far, but the European settlers, originally European settlers, pre-1948, they overwhelmingly European, they took over as much of the land as they could. They displaced the population. They created their own